Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com, DebatePhysics also.com, video presentation. Alright, Professor Dr. Don Lincoln of Fermilab. Okay, so arrogant, so full of themselves, just so awful that yes, it's worthy of conversation, so I'll converse on it. I don't have the right setup. There we go. Alright, so just the whole idea of green screen behind the blackboard. I mean, they can't even bother just to stand in front of a real blackboard, And the typical Einstein, I'm not too sure that Einstein would love the idea that this is how he's going to be represented throughout history. And when people take ownership of somebody, so this guy's going to take ownership of Newton, do the typical bullshit, put words in Newton's mouth that Newton never said, kind of crap. And so it's worthy of debunking. I mean, this is horrible history and horrible physics. And so I'm going to play the video. It's going to take a little time. And I'll point out all of the just really crap in here.
Many of you who watch this channel actually know quite a bit about physics, which makes sense.
Yeah, so blow the smoke up their butt. So yes, I say, oh, most of you watching my videos are the smartest people in the world. La 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 la. There, make you all feel good about yourselves.
Of course, because, well, you're smart and that whole...
Oh yeah, you're smart and that whole physics thing is everything. So yeah, you can see the subtitles. I'm going to play this fast just because I'm going to get through it. You ask questions about things that don't make... Let's see what he says.
Physics is everything thing. And you ask questions about things that don't make sense to you.
Yeah, there you go. So, and what they give you as answers are supposed to make sense. So they're going to say there's this thing in the universe that has momentum. That is, it moves other things, and yet it has no physical reality. And then he's going to, in the end of the video, basically say all matter doesn't have any physical reality. That there's no real stuff in the universe. It's not made of stuff. No, it's made of little magical blah 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 stuff that isn't real moving. And that's supposed to make sense to you. It doesn't make any sense to me. It'll never make any sense to me. This whole conversation is, in my opinion, way beneath our intellectual capacity. We're humiliating the human intelligence by even having a conversation premised on this babble.
A super common question is, how can a photon, which has no mass, have momentum?
Super common? He's just trying so hard to be cool. Ugh. Like, being cool is even cool anymore. It's like groovy. I can't wait till groovy comes out of his mouth. You groovy cats. I'm cool, right?
That's a good question with a lot of complexity in the answer, so let's dive into it.
Yeah, there's a lot of bullshit, so it's just going to be bullshit. Layers and layers and layers of bullshit, so we'll skip the silly intro. How can a photon have momentum? So he's not going to answer the question. He's not even going to get close to it.
Before I begin, I guess I should apologize. This video has more math in it than most.
It doesn't have any what you would call rational mathematics. It's just the 3-card Monty mathematics. We'll just keep changing what we're saying something is defined as. I guess that's a derivative, right? We'll just keep deriving things into things they really aren't until we finally turn them into something completely different. So we'll derive duck into platypus. Even though we know that's not right, we'll do it because we'll concentrate on just the parts that do match.
That's because the reason that people ask the question of how photons can have momentum is that they learned about momentum in a physics class, and they learned the equation for momentum.
And they learned that there's supposed to be this conservation of momentum and all this other stuff. And yes, our other physics won't work if photons have momentum. That's what instead of just giving the right answer, which is, well, we decided photons don't have momentum because none of our accelerator physics can be made sensible if we give photons momentum. Then there's too much energy in the universe. I mean, a mass. So we had to take away their mass.
So I have to build the explanation around that equation. This equation says that momentum, which is written as p, is equal to an object's mass, written as m, times its velocity, which is written.
So he says this is math. All right. Now, obviously, when he did that part where he's talking about how intelligent his audience is, he was just joking, because clearly he thinks they're idiots. Okay, that they have to be told this part. If this is what he calls mathematics, then yeah, okay. The joke's on the audience.
Written as V. P equals mv. That's the equation.
So you say, yes, that's what Descartes, Newton, and Galileo all thought the universe runs on, is mass and velocity. That's pretty much all they saw happening, is that masses cause, okay, have the capacity, okay, to interact with each other, and that's what they saw. Now, clearly, with magnets and different things, they knew there was something happening between those things that was more than just mass and velocity, but they couldn't account for sunlight, for example.
Immediately see the problem. Well, a photon of light travels at the speed of light, which is written as c, by the way. Its mass is 0. And 0 times the number is 0. So the momentum of a photon should be 0, right?
No, not necessarily, because the whole idea, so he says the mass of a photon is 0, how do you measure mass? Well, you measure it based on something's weight and gravity. Einstein's telling you that photons weigh twice as much in gravity. They're actually bent twice as much. So if you measured a photon in gravity, it weighs twice as much as everything else. So it doesn't even make sense on its face that they say it's the mass of a photon is 0. Where did they measure that? How did they measure this 0 mass? I mean, how do you measure something's mass besides recognizing it's real and it hits something and it moves it? That's a measurement of its mass right there. So when you measure its momentum, you're already measuring its mass. So how did they declare the 0 mass of a photon? Oh, that's right. They just declared it. They just said it's the truth. They didn't prove it's the truth. They didn't demonstrate it to be the truth. They have no reasoning or logic to make it the truth. They just need it to be the truth.
I mean, it's a really good question. Yet physicists are certain that photons have momentum.
Right. You're certain about a bunch of stuff that you haven't proven, that you don't even have logic to demonstrate, that doesn't make any sense at all. And the kinetic energy equation is just so full of that. It's so piled on as being such a pile of crap. Okay? I mean, you proved it was mv squared. And then 100 years later, after you've already proven it was mv squared, you made it 1/2 mv squared. I mean, it's a demonstration of your fallibility and your corruption. It's not a demonstration of your integrity.
So let me start with explaining this in terms of equations, then go to a more intuitive explanation.
Yeah, well, it won't be either one of those. The equations will suck and the intuitive explanation will be completely unintuitive, because he's basically going to say everything is nothing. That way we can make it do anything we want.
Well, even that's really not all that intuitive.
There you go. Yes, tell the truth now and then.
It's going to be pretty cool, but you should...
Oh, yeah, pretty cool. Cool in how? What respect? It's going to be a bunch of jargon from a preacher of the jargon, okay? This is just a religious course with the little hip professor. I'm hip. Yes, I have altar boys that I molest, but yeah, I'm hip. I'm hip. I'm hip. Ugh.
Expect that your brain cells are going to get a real serious...
So whatever that is... I mean, the flying brain. Oh, yeah, it's so charming. I love that. I love flying brains in my physics videos. So again, just trying to imply that all these dupes falling for this crap have a brain that they're using. Maybe this should be a good example of the fact that, the brain left the building. That's why you're believing this crap, is because your brain left the, necessary structure where it's supposed to be doing its thinking.
Work out here. First, let me remind you of the equations that you would have encountered in any introductory physics class.
Oh, thank you. So again, patronize me. Appreciate it.
I already reminded you of the momentum one. There's also another equation that connects mass...
Yeah, there we go. The kinetic energy equation. So this is where he's going to do the big lie.
Velocity and kinetic energy. This is kinetic energy, which is written as Ke equals 1/2 times the mass m times the...
Right, and it started off without the half here. So it was just mv squared for 100 years. Mv squared was the right answer. And then all of a sudden they just stuck this 1/2 in it like no one noticed. Oh yeah, we fixed it a little. Yeah, it's still way off, but it's only half is way off.
Velocity v squared. So we say that Ke equals 1/2 mv.
Right, you say it, and a 1,000-year-old lever proves that it's nonsense. Because I use the lever one way, I lose half my energy. I use the lever the opposite way, I get free energy. So clearly it fails the lever test, And you still believe it. We believe.
Squared. You probably remember all that. Now let me show you how kinetic energy and momentum are related. Let's start with the momentum equation.
Yeah, they're related because they're made out of the same thing, mv. The same components are in it. And all you've done is put a little Holy Ghost over here and a little whatever, Jeebus on this side. That's it. You've just added some characters to the religion.
E equals mv. Now square both sides. You get p squared equals m squared v squared. So far so good, right?
No, it's so far pointless. But okay, yes, and you could divide by 7, and then you could you could double square it. You could put a double square on both sides. Yeah, you could add a bunch of superfluous nonsense, yes, to confuse the morons. So yes, confuse people by doing something completely pointless. That'll show them. Look, I did the same thing to both sides. Now I'll paint a mustache on this side and a mustache on this side. So this is like a Mr. Potato Head trick, right? They're just moving all the pieces around, and they're hoping you're not going to keep track of how many eyeballs there were and how many noses. So if they keep moving all the pieces around, they can stink in. They'll slip in that third eye. The all-knowing eye. They'll sneak it in there and say, "See, Mr. Potato Head is a Hindu."
Now divide both sides by m. On the right-hand side,
right, for no good reason again. Right, so we know P is mv. So we know the m's cross out on this side, the m's could cross out on that side. We know that could happen. But we won't pay any attention. We won't do that yet.
Bottom m cancels one of the top m's, and you get p squared.
Right, so, and it doesn't do anything on this side for some magical reason we're not going to bother. Okay, just so we can keep this looking funky, and we'll make this look like this. And this is where he's just going to slip in the half now. Now he's just going to make it like, oh, well, you already see this is mv squared, so all what's missing is the half. So, yeah, let's put that in.
Divided by m equals mv squared, which should remind you of something, specifically the kinetic energy equation.
Right, so he switches to the kinetic energy equation so you won't remember what Mr. Potato Head looked like. The two equations he already has, because now he's going to do the sleight of hand.
You can replace the m times v squared in the kinetic energy equation with this p squared over m thing.
Yes, right, you can do that. Or not. You could choose not to do that. So this is really 1/2 mv squared, right? So when you do this 2m thing in the bottom, you're really just doing 1/2 mv squared. And now he's going to go back to the other formula and say, that the what he left as momentum is the same as this, when it's obviously not the same as this because he didn't do the 2 thing to both sides.
What you find is that the kinetic energy equals the momentum squared divided by twice the mass. Ke equals p squared divided by 2m.
Right, so I'm just saying, it's just another way of writing 1/2 mv squared. That's all this is. It doesn't say anything more than 1/2 mv squared.
Okay, the first conclusion to draw here is that
right, so now he didn't even show us anything. So that's as far as it goes. So he takes the momentum formula and then tries to make you think he just converted it into the kinetic, like somehow they're equal, when clearly they're not equal. They're not the same at all. mv does not equal mv 1/2 mv squared. They're not equal at all.
In classical physics, and I remind you that these...
So he's using the word classical physics, which doesn't mean anything. They don't tell you what year classical physics stops at. What's the year? What's the magic? When's it, 1665? What's the magic year where you stopped having classical physics and now we have modern physics? What's the magical year? There's no magical year. This is just jargon used to try to establish that somehow this modern crap has some kind of foundation in reason and logic, when clearly it doesn't.
Equations were devised back in Newton's time.
So they weren't, all right? 1/2 mv squared wasn't derived by anybody. Nobody was using it. What they were using was mv squared. No half in front of it. Huge, giant, idiotic mistake. It got idiotic numbers. It exaggerated energy, insanely. Bullets had 4,000 joules. The gun has 4. I mean, absolute nonsense in terms of blowing up everything Newton believed in. So he's showing Newton's face and implying that the derivative he just did has something to do with Newton. When Newton overtly opposed mv squared as a thought or an idea, he clearly defended momentum as being the definition of energy. So did Descartes. So this is just lying about, these are supposed, like, again, this is stomping on the shoulders of giants. This is not standing on their shoulders, okay? This is lying about them. This is stealing their reputation, their thoughts, their intellect, and taking it for you and pasting his picture on your bullshit. Okay, you're preaching a completely different religion than the one Newton proselytized for. And again, let's just understand, Newton was a religious kook, but he clearly didn't let that influence his physics any. Nor did Descartes substantially do anything like that. I mean, they certainly talked about their God, but they didn't talk about it and say, look, God forces the physics to do this.
And they didn't worry about things moving near the speed of light. But even back then, we can see that kinetic energy and momentum are related.
So it wasn't related at all. It was an overt attack against Newtonian physics. So this is the irony, right? Kinetic energy, mv squared, was an overt attack against Descartes and Newton. Descartes especially, but Newton, it's the Newton's Descartesian part, right? I mean, frankly, Newton came after Descartes. Newton made Descartes into a cleaner bit of physics. And it's a clear, overt attack against that physics. So to sit there and put Newton's picture on top of this lies, and this is all it is, it's a lie. So Dr. Lincoln, you're a liar to sit there and use Newton's face to defend kinetic energy formula. It wasn't his derivative, it wasn't his idea, it wasn't his belief, okay? And it was the belief of the man he hated most on planet Earth. All right, this was a real attack against Newton's physics. This is not Newton's physics. It's an attack against Newton's physics. And you're just lying about that history because, frankly, you have to have some inkling of it. You couldn't have acquired a doctorate in physics, I don't think, without having to research a little bit of this crap.
We have an equation with energy on one side and momentum on the other.
Which is nonsense. You can't do that. Momentum is energy. Newton said so. And again, you're just slandering. You're using his reputation to justify the bullshit you're speaking. And it's bullshit. Criminally bullshit, in my opinion. I mean, it's just such an overt disrespect to the frickin' facts.
And this kind of means that anything with kinetic energy must...
He's got Einstein's picture on his shirt. He's going to bring up Einstein. And what did Einstein say 2 years before he died? I have been studying photons for 50 years, and I haven't improved my understanding one fucking little tiny bit. So do you quote that? Do you recognize that Einstein wasn't at all confident in any of this crap? That you say now you've proven, that we're all established, it's all well-established fact?
Also have momentum. Of course, we still have that m kicking around, which is 0 for photons, so I haven't really answered the question.
Yeah, you haven't come anywhere close, and then he's going to, now he's going to play his little April Fool's joke. April Fool's, I didn't mean any of this.
I didn't intend to at this point. I just wanted to show you that kinetic energy and momentum are related.
So, Glenn, they're obviously related as they're made out of the same components. So, yes, of course, water and dirt. Well, I guess mud is related. I don't know. I mean, it's just so stupid to say, of course they're related. They're made out of the same components. So, but the point is obviously MV does not equal 1/2 MV squared. Those are obviously not equalities.
Even classically. Okay, now to get into something you might...
Even classically, he says. So again, what is the fact is that if Newtonian physics is going to be called classic, clearly this was the first attack against classic physics, was the invention of kinetic energy. It's the first attack.
Not have known. Let's move into this new material. And I want to tell you something, and that is that these equations aren't completely true. That's right.
Okay, so this is what what is this? These antics. So this is an April Fool's fun thing. It's not going to make any sense. All right, so just that's right. You've been lied to. Yeah, wake up, sheeple. It's all true. All right, that you're just a propagandist. Now you're pretending that, look, you're trying to defend yourself by mocking the criticism as all being a conspiracy theory. Only a conspiracy theory could, they're just attacking us as being conspiring. No, I'm attacking you as being lying and stupid.
You've been lied to. Wake up, sheeple. The man is lying to you. Man, I have always wanted to say that in the video. Why?
Why? Why would you always want to do that? I have a lot of things on my always wanted to list. Nah, not on my list. I got better things to do. Einstein had better things to do.
Should others have all the fun? Of course, like a lot of times when people toss around the word sheeple, what I just said was a little misleading, and the real story is a bit complicated.
Okay, it's not at all complicated, okay? The guy who invented it overtly said, your physics is too atheist. That's where it comes from, okay? So it's a religious dogma he threw into the middle of physics. And yes, at the time, most people didn't pay any attention because they saw it as religious dogma thrown in the middle of physics. And it was dug up 30 years later. And, because of, a cute chick started propaganda, writing it on her boobs, you all fell for it like little nerdy morons.
The real truth is that those equations are special cases that only work for objects with mass that is moving.
Well, then we should already have a rule that special cases is sort of a bullshit in physics. So yeah, that's the excuse for it. Yes, it creates lots of errors and it doesn't really apply and it doesn't really work. So as soon as you have to start saying, oh, you have to start making too many special cases, then maybe it's not the right answer. That might be a giveaway.
Slow speeds. And of course, I should be upfront that when I say the man is someone like me. So I guess you have to decide whether to believe me or not, but you should.
Yes, no, you shouldn't. You shouldn't believe him. Unfortunately, no one's ever going to be able to tell his audience that they shouldn't, because yes, his arguments suck. Okay, he has very little logic in the reasoning, and whatever arguments he uses, they're propagandized. They've got Einstein's face painted on them or Newton's face painted on them when they really, again, he should put it the way it is. You believe in mv squared because the first initiative, the first act was an act of a religious dogmatist imposing his religion on science. That's why mv squared exists. That's why.
Because, I know stuff. And it's way cool.
Oh, yeah, I know stuff and it's way cool. I mean, he's a little proud of himself, right? So what do you know exactly? Do you actually know the history of any of this crap? Did you ever look and say, hey, I wonder where they got the MV from? The MV squared. I wonder where that came from. Did you ever look it up?
Now comes the next surprise, and that surprise involves Einstein. Of course, Einstein was all about moving at super fast speeds near the speed of light, so you know that he's going to pop up in any discussion involving photons and momentum.
Well, frankly, it's, and then you're going to sit there and put words in Einstein's mouth because Einstein kind of did believe in momentum. But anyway, we'll play along and see where it goes.
And when you think about Einstein, you almost always think about his famous equation, E equals mc squared.
Well, and I think about that bit where he said light is bent twice as much by, gravity. And so somehow the only particle that's not a real particle doesn't have a real mass. So everything else that's affected by gravity has to have mass to be affected by gravity, except for the magical photon. So it doesn't get affected by gravity. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, it does. So even though it has zero mass, it somehow is affected by gravity. So it breaks the basic rule that things that don't have mass can't be affected by gravity. Are neutrinos affected by gravity? I don't know. Where are you going to take this? What magical way? Where's this nonsense end in terms of you're playing this game with? You can't say both things. You can't say something's twice as bent by gravity, and then say, that gravity has something to do with mass. Apparently, it has nothing to do with mass.
And guess what? That equation's wrong too. Come on, sheeple, wake up! How long are you going to stay fooled? Okay, I promise. That's the last rant. But
he called that a rant. Okay, no, that's a silly fart. Okay, you just embarrassed yourself a little. All right, anyway. has a super tiny kernel of truth. I mean, so he's saying E equals mc squared has a super tiny kernel of truth in it. Now, I'd say the kernel is that, obviously, I think what Einstein was really saying is the space occupied by mass. Okay, mass has to occupy space. And that piece of that amount of space, if you just think about it in the universe as a clump of space, space has this continuous amount of energy in it. So the average clump of space, the size of a clump of matter, okay, the pieces that make up the atom, if you add up the amount of space the pieces take up or occupy, that's a certain amount of energy in the real universe. I mean, I could make the argument, I should make the argument, well, I won't do it in this video because I've done it in others. Mass really consumes energy. So E equals mc squared is sort of backwards in a sense, because it's really a measure of how much energy is consumed by matter. Matter doesn't make the universe hotter, it makes it colder, because matter moves much slower and is basically every time it moves somewhere from point A to point B, it's consuming energy that would have been in the universe bouncing around, making everything hotter. So the more matter in the universe, the colder the universe gets.
Has a super tiny kernel of truth. E equals mc squared is also an approximate equation, and one that only works for objects with mass that are stationary. It's not a general equation, and it doesn't work for massless objects.
Okay, so again, it works for the massless photon in a sense, but whatever, let's play along.
Or objects that are moving. In fact, I made a whole video just digging into the limitations of this equation. The link is down there in the description. Watch it later if you're interested.
Not much chance.
So now we're ready to get to the truth. I put the three equations I've mentioned so far here. E equals mc.
All right, so this KE one, again, is just rewriting the formula. So we could have just written 1/2 mv squared. But, they put it in this form so they can move the little pieces around to create what they want to create out of it. So we know momentum's the only real thing here. The rest of this crap is made up crap, frankly. This one's the one you can really depend on. Okay, this is the one, as Professor Loon would say, you can finagle kinetic energy, but nature can't finagle momentum.
C squared, P equals mv, and Ke equals p squared divided by 2m. And all of these equations are just fine and correct, but they are all equations that only describe objects with mass.
So he just did his little joke thing where he said, oh yeah, that's bullshit. And now he says they're all correct. So what is this? What does this even mean? He just pointed out how E equals mc squared has only got a tiny kernel of correct in it. So why is he saying it's all correct now? I mean, he's contradicting himself in his own video.
To move slowly. Those equations fail in other situations. It turns.
So he's just playing this game where he's going to either take away the object's velocity or he's going to take away its mass, put a 0 into the equation, and there'll only be a little piece of the equation left over. So it's just a silly game.
It's out that there is a more general equation that works for all situations, and it looks kind of like Einstein's famous equation.
So it doesn't work for all situations. He'll never prove it works for all situations. He's just saying those words as if they have some kind of facts. And they don't have any facts. It won't work on a lever. It'll fail the lever test. So just because it's really just the kinetic energy formula rewritten.
This equation is energy squared equals.
Right, so this is, all he did is create a derivative, and we really don't have momentum in here anymore. Okay, so obviously when you're adding all this extra stuff, that's just the kinetic energy nonsense, right? I mean, so yeah, you still have mass and velocity barely in the equation. So velocity is barely in the equation anymore. And you have all these extra c squareds. So that's a consequence of the idea that now he's going to tell us that if I have two carts bang into each other, I'm going to measure how much nuclear energy the two carts have. So I'm going to take their total mass, and then I'm going to figure out exactly how much energy every single every single electron and proton in that mass weighs, and then I'm going to calculate how much energy by E equals mc squared that represents. So instead of figuring out the tiny difference in the momentums of the two carts, I'm going to get these preposterously insane numbers that cart A has 4 quadrillion joules, and cart B has 4 quadrillion 0.000004 joules or something. I mean, it's just idiotic. This formula is totally useless in any real circumstance. It won't tell you anything about the momentum of a wrecking ball or a bowling ball or anything else.
The momentum times the speed.
It's got the point is it's got the 1/2 mv squared in it. Okay, so it can't get you the right answer because mv squared doesn't get right answers.
Speed of light squared plus the mass of the object times the speed of light squared, all squared. E squared equals pc squared plus mc squared, all squared. Now this equation works for everything.
Right, it doesn't work for anything. So again, it just doesn't work for everything. It's just a lie. So it won't pass the lever test. You won't show me it passing the lever test. I'll put a certain trillion, energy units in one side of the lever, and I'll get some other bizarre number out of the other side. It won't be the right answer. You won't get an equivalency passing the simple test. You'll end up creating energy or losing energy without explaining where it went or where it came from.
Massive objects, massless objects, things moving near the speed of light, things moving at the speed of light, and things that are stationary. And we can look at the special cases. For instance, let's see how it...
So just point. So he's just going to do this special case thing, and he won't give us any examples in the real world of how he figured out the energy of, the fat kid on one side of the teeter-totter and the light kid on the other side. He won't explain any of it. He won't show how the formula can even predict that answer correctly.
Works in the special case of a photon. Since the photon has 0 mass, this second term on the right-hand side goes to 0.
Well, technically, since P, is 0, as mass times velocity is what it represents, this side is also 0. Right? I mean, come on, logically, we know that's true, right? I mean, P represents mass times velocity, so I'm already got a 0 for P. I can't say it has momentum when I've already canceled its mass. So isn't that a lie too?
And we have that energy equals momentum times the speed of light.
Right. So does it really make any sense? We know the P represents mv. Well, how could P be anything if I've already said mass is 0? So I have 0 again. So E equals 0. So why is he playing the game?
So here we see that energy and momentum are equal, except for a constant. And...
except for a huge constant. I mean, a gigantic number we're going to multiply it by. Getting a gigantically huge number. So so anybody could just see that cheat, right? I mean, that cheat was so obvious. I mean, to sit there and say, well, I know there's an M here, and I could have wrote this as MVC. No, same thing. So we know... I know both sides cancel.
If an object isn't moving, then its momentum is 0, which means that P is...
so if it's not moving, right? So now we have a 0 on this side, and somehow we're going to say, okay, now it's just mass times the speed of light squared again. Huh? What? Isn't that like some sort of gigantic number? But anyway, there's just no point. So yes, there's no velocity over here explicitly, except for the fact that you've declared c squared as the velocity, which I guess, is sort of cheating. Because nothing could ever have a squared velocity.
0, which gets you back to Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. So I guess the first lesson is that when you learn an equation, it's super important to understand if it's a special case or not, and if it's a special case, when it applies and when it doesn't.
Right. You just have to learn your 3-card Monty tricks to fool people and to fake. So you fake them out by changing P. Instead of putting MV in the equation, you decide to put P in the equation. Even though you know the P is made out of MV. And you know that if one of those components is 0, then the P has to be 0. So you're just saying no matter how I write the equation, I can form the equation to get the answer I want to get is the simple answer, right? I just put it in the right code, and then I can decode it into the answer I want, and that's it. It's just complete circular mush.
The bottom line is that the familiar equation, P equals mv, just doesn't apply for massless photons, and the question...
Okay, so it doesn't apply for photons. So he just made it apply. He just showed how to apply it, and now he says it doesn't apply. Surrender.
Of photon momentum, well, completely sensible, arises from using an equation in a situation where it was never intended to be.
Okay, so again, he says it's never intended to be, and yet, I guess, every piece of evidence says photons have to have mass because gravity doesn't affect things when they're massless, and and then you got the whole problem of, the fact is it does produce momentum. Now, how does it do it without having any mass?
I could spend a long time showing you how you can manipulate this general equation that equates energy, momentum, and mass.
You could just bullshit. Look at this. I can make squiggly lines. I can put a big Z here. I can draw some sort of square and a triangle thingy and blah, blah, blah. I can do all this bullshit and somehow fool morons. I mean, these are compounds, chemicals. This isn't an energy formula.
But I will leave that you to play around with if you want. And I put a link in the description to a couple of websites that do a lot of the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah, whatever.
By the way, let me tantalize you a bit. That 1/2 mv squared thing is itself only an approximation for kinetic energy.
Yeah, so it's only an approximation. Says you again. So I guess he's just arguing that somehow the mass is changing as I change the velocity. So it can never give you a right answer because as soon as you change the velocity, you change the mass, or some kind of crap like that.
That works only at very low velocities. There are more precise approximations. There are endless levels of complexity.
Okay, so endless levels of complexity when it's 1/2 mv squared. How does that get complex? Yeah, it really doesn't.
So that's the equation-y way of thinking about this.
So he calls it the equation-y way.
Equations very clearly show that energy and momentum are related, and that
No, so the equations, the history, the facts actually indicate that they're not related at all, that one is an exact attack against the other as being the truth, and a replacement for it. They aren't compatible concepts in any way whatsoever. I mean, mv does not equal 1/2 mv squared. They don't get the same answer. They're not the same number. It doesn't make any sense.
Object that has energy also has momentum, even if it has no mass. But maybe you're looking for something deeper, something more intuitive.
No, something rational, something logical, some kind of explanation that would make some sort of sense to somebody who just was an honest observer of the universe and said, give me an answer that makes some sense.
You think that perhaps mass is somehow special. Well, let me disappoint you there, too. To first approximation, modern physics has proven that mass is an illusion.
So, to a first approximation, modern physics has proven that mass is an illusion. I mean, what the hell is this crap? Why make videos? Why bother if this is your religion? I mean, your religion says there's no such thing as anything. That's the religion. Yeah, there's nothing, so don't pay any attention to anything. Don't worry about, your father's got cancer. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's all an illusion. Who cares? Why am I making videos? Who cares? Just pay Google some money. Don't bother wasting your time watching my videos. Just give Google some money and say the hell with it.
There is no mass. Now, I made an entire video on this topic, and I put a link in the description.
Yeah. So this is, billion-dollar Fermi lab. This is their big religious lie. Oh, well, everything's made out of our little blinky things. And they don't have, so electrons don't have any mass, even though electrons aren't supposed to be made out of quarks. But so somehow, I can understand they got rid of the proton's mass by, inventing magical massless bing bongs. But how do you get rid of an electron's mass? Jesus.
For you to watch. It's one of my.
I mean, it's small compared to the proton, but it's still there. I mean, it's a lot of electrons in the universe. I mean, it's pretty stupid to say, they're all illusionary. It's silly. It's not. It's just retarded, frankly.
Favorite videos, and definitely one of the most mind-blowing. But let me just sketch it out.
No, again, he's doing all this mind stuff, like he has some concept of how a brain should be used. So he's sketching it out for us.
Here for you.
So this was a simple question, right? How can a photon have momentum? And he's going to answer it basically by talking about how nothing has any momentum, because nothing has any mass.
Just expect that everything you think that you know about mass is about to be upended, and watch the video to get the whole story.
Oh, I just remembered I should have put this volume up. Well, too bad, too late. So you'll have to deal with it as it is. Big mistake there, sorry. Well, I'll just see what the...
You are made of mass, which is true of anything that is made of atoms. The mass of objects made of atoms is found in the atoms' protons and neutrons. The electrons pretty much don't matter, but protons and neutrons are made of smaller objects, which have very little mass, nearly none. So where does the mass of protons and neutrons come from? Those objects are orbiting around each other at crazy fast speeds.
Okay, says you. So this is all stuff he made up, okay? Crazy fast speeds and all this kind of crap. They don't have any physical evidence that anything's moving at any crazy fast speed. So just talk. And he already knows that neutrons are basically a proton and an electron. So, the whole thing doesn't make any sense to be talking about neutrons in any other context than just acknowledging that they're not neutral. In the sense they're a dipole. And a dipole is neutral in the sense if you add it up, minus plus a plus. 1 plus 1 plus minus 1 is nothing. So, you start with what you finish with. It's neutral.
You can think of protons and neutrons as tiny subatomic tornadoes, vortices of motion. And
so again, tornadoes and vortices. This might be a Ken Wheeler video now. Vortices. Fuck. Yeah, like they have any video of that.
And that's all they are. If you look at them, there's nearly no mass in the way that we intuitively think about mass.
Oh, intuitively think about mass. How do you think about mass? You don't think about mass. You don't take any account for any of it. A photon is, its polarization is gigantic. Thousands of atoms worth of polarization. The wavelength alone is thousands of atoms of width. The wavelength of a photon is thousands of atoms. Okay, so how can you talk about an electron pooping one of these things out? It's thousands of atoms in size, and you're saying a tiny electron vorticed it? I mean, it's just too silly.
Mass is just energy. So
whatever. So more mush. It's exactly the opposite. Mass consumes energy. Mass makes the universe colder. The energy is in the universe moving. There's photons moving towards me from all over the frickin' place. Cell phone calls, the computer monitor. I'm getting bombarded constantly. And the more I move, right, because I'm moving really slow, the less the universe has action in it. Because I'm consuming it to move big clunky matter really slow. And that explains gravity, and that explains everything. You're just sitting in the universe. Your mass is just reflecting the universe. And you reflect more the faster you move. And you reflect less the slower you move.
Assuming that you're willing to accept that, you really should watch that video because it shows this idea in far more detail. Moving mass is just moving energy. And of course, a photon is moving energy.
So again, more just ambiguous, mushy talk. So here he has, these are really great graphics.
So when you get right down to it, a moving...
So we know that the photon, its polarization and wavelength make it a zillion times bigger than a proton. Okay, so the photon should be drawn, and like a, especially like a radio photon. Gigantic. I mean, it's humongous compared to the size of a proton. And yet we're supposed to believe that the electron, something much tinier than the proton, is somehow producing it. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think there's anything intuitively reasonable in that comparison. That drawing doesn't have anything to do with reality. And look what the photon is. It's some kind of blob of blobbiness. When I think logical people could understand that, no, the wavelength is just the period between the little bits of energy. It's just a frequency of bits of energy hitting something.
Photon or a moving proton are not so different. Both are nothing more than moving energy.
Moving energy, whatever that means. Moving of the massless nothings.
So if a moving proton has momentum, so does a moving photon. And that's really all there is to it.
Oh, brother. So you drew them as things, but they're not things. Why didn't you draw them as, vortices of doom?
On the other hand, I predict that this whole topic has made you think very differently about mass and energy.
Your bad prediction. It makes me it's revolting. See, the whole thing is a revolting example of brains gone bad. Smart people being really, really dumb.
And how they really aren't all that different. The more you learn about the subatomic world, the more you learn that it's some crazy stuff down there.
Oh, whatever. It's crazy stuff. It's crazy cool, crazy fun, crazy, crazy, crazy. It's a religion.
Okay, so this can...
Okay, a cult. You can't even call it a religion because nobody even they only have a Bible. They just have Babel. Let's see, a quick tour through the complicated topic, a very complicated topic. MV, that's complicated, damn. Mass times velocity, shit, that's really complicated.
Concludes our very quick tour through a very complicated topic. If you learned something about the video, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, and share.
Blah, 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 blah. Be part of the Borg.
Well, the first message is that photons certainly do carry momentum. I think the
they certainly carry momentum, but they certainly aren't mass, and they certainly are just imaginary.
most important message is to always remember that equations only apply in certain situations.
Blah, 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 that our equations are just ways to shyster you, fool you. We were talking about momentum, then we switched the screen, showed 1/2 mv squared, and then just left it there and just said, see, somehow momentum is mv squared, 1/2 mv squared. When, of course, it isn't.
And if you try to use them incorrectly, you're going to get confused. And this leads me to my final message, which is you study physics.
Messages. If you study physics at a deeper level, yeah, he's so deep.
At a deeper and deeper level, there's always something more to appreciate. And the more you appreciate, the more you realize.
Yeah, it's more God talk. It just might as well just be God. It'll make you happy to believe what we believe, because as believers, we'll all be believers. It'll be fun to be a believer. We can do swirly things. Hey, la 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 la. Black holes and such. And I'll get paid to talk this bullshit. Propaganda is fun. Lying about Newton is fun.
The physics is everything.
Fuck. So Iron Crass, he must have something to do with this horse shit in some way. They needed 2 people to make this piece of crap. Produced by. So I don't even know what that means, produced by. It's Fermi Lab. This guy produced it? No, I think the United States government produced it. Yeah, I don't think you're in, a private company. Fermi Lab. So even this is such a pile of crap. Produced by. Anyway. Could have said edited, maybe. I don't know. Materials provided. Hubble, NASA. I didn't see any of that. U.S. Department of Energy. Yeah, so this is sponsored by the United States government. Good old United States government propaganda. We need people to believe in the universe is imaginary. It's good for them. Yeah. We've read the secret monad soliton theory of Leibniz and fell for it. Yeah, solitons. Yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah, the universe is made out of monads and solitons. Oh, fuck. I hate this planet. Alright. So anyway, this has been a DraftPhysics.com video presentation. I mean, I could draw some photon shit, but there's no point. I mean, the video was on its face crap. The 1/2 mv squared kinetic energy formula has no credibility. It's a free energy formula. They can't explain how it's not. They can't defend it against its failure of the lever test. They can't even show us how levers prove it, because levers disprove it. But anyway, till the next time and such.